And everyone walks around with their phone with selfies and pictures, and whether it's the workplace, their private life, and it's like, look, less that we know is better. So,
Just know, you guys are coming at my generation, by the way. So,
Welcome to Ventures and Visionaries, the nexus of innovation and leadership. In each episode, join us as we engage industry giants and explore the intersection of technology, business, and forward-thinking strategies. Get ready for a compelling discussion that illuminates the path to business success in the modern world.
no, well, I understand.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
All right, let's
kidding.
bring Greg in.
I'm
By the
kidding.
way, just to point out, Greg is a professional lacrosse player, and he can beat the living daylights out of all of us. Just saying.
No,
So
where's
you-
the flow bucket, Greg?
Yeah,
I don't see the flow bucket.
I can't do the flow because this is as long as my hair will get until it turns into the most curly hair you'll ever see. Like I can't even put my helmet on. It's insanity.
Yeah, but Greg is used to all this new high-tech equipment. I got an old-fashioned, Brazilian cherry hardwood D-pole that if I hit you with it, you're going to know you got hit with it more so than one of those fiberglass poles.
That's true. Irwin, that was I want to say middle school for me is when they banned the wooden shafts, and I just remember carrying it and you could barely even hold it. It was so heavy. Now they're like,
But it was good because if you could use that for practice, you could be able to whip that stick around on the field in the game.
Nice. I actually wanted to take that in a slightly different direction, and that is, the responsibility of leadership. Meaning, like, if the younger generation is in fact dealing with a lack of proper leaders who are not able to articulate a good vision, not able to get them to buy into a mission, not able to help them understand why they should do this, and all they're getting from social media, as Irwin pointed out, is some other nonsense that they don't really understand or want or deal with, and they look at all these little reels that say just do this, and here's an Amazon trick to make $1 million a month, and everyone's like, yeah, why don't I just do that? I don't know, why don't I do that? And the question becomes,
That's what they're doing. The ones that can.
right, but how many of those are actually succeeding? What, 2%, 1%? I mean,
Very
it's got to
few.
be a tiny, right? It's got to be a tiny little percent of the people who are succeeding, just like in any other business. And the more we talk about the inability of people to embrace growth and change, and balance that against operational excellence, so what exactly are we dealing with? Because we would be looking at people who otherwise, I think Steve was the one who said this, like, really put their head in the sand. Reality isn't what it is. They think it's something else, and they kind of like, I don't know, just pretend that they're going through emotions that don't really have impact on any level. I don't know. Sorry for soapboxing on that one.
Well, look, I mean, like to get on with your question or comment, Morty, around leadership. I think the great thing about being an entrepreneur or a business manager or a business leader is that you're picking your talent. Of course, you have to source it and you have to get it in front of you, and you have to have a story that's attractive to get the talent in the door. But you're picking the talent, and if I'm looking across the table from somebody who doesn't get fundamental responsibility, somebody who is looking to blame society or any other thing at all, I mean, I'm a next. That's the shortest interviews I have. Once I get a sense, I smell that somebody is not going to be a responsible agent in my company. That's the most noxious type of player that you can possibly have to go through your doors. So I think that the biggest screen I have is if somebody is prone to go to like that they have somehow been victimized by the organization or the stories they tell about themselves. That's the fastest screen and the most important screen by far that I use.
Maybe elaborate on either a story of somewhere where you've sniffed it out, or some other questions that you tend to ask in order to determine whether or not.
Well, I mean, you get a lot of that through sort of the sideways listening, so you kind of listen with the slant. But like if you're talking to somebody who's like when you look at their resume and they've jumped around a lot. For example, there's lots of great reasons to jump around, but if they're telling you each story and they say, well, the boss did this, or my colleague did like one story about them not being in control of their experience. And of course, the truth is they're not fully in control of their experience. If they're not owning what happened to them, and don't express, and they don't, like some people come in and say exactly what I'm saying, and I listen to that. But you really want to listen to how they share what has happened to them in terms of their historical experiences or what they want to do in the future. If there's a lot of limitations and explanations about failure that are everybody else's fault, then you're dealing with the personality that's not good. For me, I'm dealing with personality I don't want in my organization. I don't want them anywhere near my organization. So I mean, you could get more specific, but that's the gist, Morty.
No, Irwin, what do you think? What are your experiences?
Leadership is important, but I think people want to work. They also have to want to learn. They have to want to adapt. Especially if you have no work experience, don't tell me you know a better way. Where everybody wants to change the world out of school because of something they learned out of a textbook. I think they should just stop with half those textbooks because they have no bearing on the real world. All they are basic framework, they're guidelines. It's not gospel. Even in law school, it's all just precedents. It doesn't mean that in the law operates in different shades of gray depending who your counsel is and who the judge is. And I think people have to understand that. But if there's something that you could tell me you had a real life experience and I can relate to it, that I might say, oh, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, maybe.
Yep.
We can work this in over time, but let's see how you do it my way first before you try to suggest it your way.
Yeah, and it's incredibly interesting that you noted that both now and before that the educational system may be actually failing the young generations, because if we're not teaching them, I mean, balancing one's checkbook, if you have a program for it, is no longer the skill that you need, but household budgeting. Who doesn't need a household budget process?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, skills are one dimension, but like, how do you teach somebody if it's to be, it's up to me, right? That's hard. That's harder. I mean,
I'm sorry, Steve. Say that again. How do
you
what?
teach somebody to adopt the attitude that if it's to be, it's up to me, like to be a responsible agent? That is not. I don't think that ethos is being driven in our university system at all right now.
No.
I think there's a lot of emphasis around identifying other people that are responsible for your failures as a rule in a lot of the educational frameworks that I experience with, and that's the most important to me. That's the most important commodity.
To me, the differentiator there is the extracurriculars. Are you a member of a group that serves, like the military? Are you, a leader for youth where, like, the scouts? Do you need to teach? Do you need to be responsible for other people? Do you need to have learned, were you a counselor in camp? Did you need to be responsible for kids, making sure that they, cleaned up after themselves and, didn't kill each other quite literally? Like, that's to me true mind-opening leadership, particularly for the places that really care and do well.
Yeah, you make a great point there. I mean, like you get somebody that's been in a band. I mean, that person knows how to play team, right? Or somebody's on the lax team. Those individuals know what it means to play for the greater good, and you don't get that in the classroom. You're right about that. That's a great point.
Yeah, we're joined here by Greg, who's the producer of the show. He jumped in, and Greg is, going to potentially have some interesting perspectives, especially because he's got a few less gray hairs than the rest of us do. Greg, maybe just throw in some observations about school and what do you think is being taught, is not being taught, should be taught, and as somebody who plays, organized sports, what do you think about the comments that Steven made earlier about?
Yeah, I look at it from two perspectives. One, I think that there is a motivational aspect where people of my age, they don't want to work as hard. And I think that is due to our, just prevalence in technology. We grew up with it. And, I always like to say, like, the greatest generation are the World War II guys. Everyone thinks of them as just the hardest working guys, but, I was born in 1996. There's nothing I can do about that. And so I'm lucky enough to have had parents that kind of forced me into organized sports and forced me to learn how to work hard. And if you have to wake up at 4:30 in the morning to work out, then you do. But I'd say 1% of my generation will honestly even do that. And in terms of kind of, you guys were talking earlier about how they expect $1 million their first year. It's almost, and I hate to say it about my generation, there isn't really a respect for authority anymore. Going to college, I was 18, and my college lacrosse coach kind of ran it in a military style. We had 4:30 a.m. practice 4 days a week. So if you talked back, if you did anything of that sense, you're running, and it's kind of, you learn there is one man in charge. If you start a job, that person of authority is, your authority. You understand what they say, and you do what they say, and you do it to the best of your ability. But that's just not what's being taught anymore. It's kind of being taught that you use technology to get through the hard stuff, and anything after that, that's not your fault. We'll do better. It's nothing's tailored towards you anymore. It's just kind of trying to get kids through a system. It's not necessarily trying to help them.
Well, the context for that is that what comes up for me is I have a friend who's a professor at a school, and he constantly is complaining that they pay me. I spent a lot of time getting educated. They pay me a lot of money to sit up and teach, and my kids, the students, they're not holding me as an expert and seeking to learn from the things that I've learned. They're constantly checking me. They're looking for me. They're trying to correct me. They have a lot of issues beyond what's being learned that come in the classroom. I think there's a lot of rewards for this idea of students being activists, and there's a lot of good in that. But the bad side is that the whole construct for teaching and learning and getting information transfer is disrupted by the idea that students know more than the teacher does. And I think that is I think that comes into the workforce in the form of what Irwin's talking about, somebody wanting to make $1 million in the first year. It's I don't know where all that's coming from. I'm not a social scientist, but I think that those things are real. And if you're young and you want to get in and make a difference, I think you should be really cognizant of that and go the other direction, because the world's hungry for young talent, and particularly hungry for young talent that gets that they're responsible for themselves and responsible for figuring stuff out and actually adding value in order to get paid.
Steve, I like what you're saying, and I'll go back to something you said a couple of minutes ago, and that is the challenging of authority through knowledge. It's something that I heard when I was probably in high school, maybe early college. A friend of mine who went to prep school used to say that the way they would go back and challenge their teacher was they would pick some author that it was likely that the teacher had not read and said, but doesn't Dostoevsky say something different? And at some point they would pick some author that the teacher had to admit, well, I have not read, author XYZ. And then today with Google, and then all credibility has disappeared. But today with Google, you can find any information that you could possibly want. So maybe Irwin can take us away a little bit about, how do you bridge the gap between the difference between infinite knowledge, which is what we have, and maybe if one could say that wisdom is the ability to apply that knowledge intelligently, contextually, being able to understand how to use it properly?
Well, I don't think we have infinite knowledge and wisdom because we're always learning. But if I did, I wouldn't be on this call. I've got an island
What
somewhere.
do you mean? You
Uh,
totally wanted to be on this call. You don't
That's
know.
such a disrespect, man. I can't believe you went there.
You for
no,
sure wanted to be on this call.
no, I probably would still be on the call, but I'd be really full of myself, and none of you would ever be able to get a word in, if that was the case. But it's a learning process, and I think as we take it in, we have to be able to relate to other generations to try to instill upon them the knowledge and the wisdom. Especially in the financial sector or even in real estate. You look at what's going on now with all the mounting walls of maturities and potential defaults, and when you talk to some of these people who are out of grad school, they may be 30 years old or in their 30s, and they're like, what do you mean interest rates aren't going to drop next week? They have to. Look at Blackstone and Starwood. They have trillions of dollars of real estate. They're going to lose money. I'm like, well, so not everybody makes money all the time. Some people have to lose for others to make. And there's a cycle. It's about how aggressive you are in your assumptions, either with life, with finance, with budgeting, uh, which really ends up rewarding people. It's not always, the hare doesn't beat the tortoise. Very few times in the long term does the hare win over the tortoise. And it's getting people to really understand cycles that they haven't seen and to maybe try to educate them so they can at one point be a smarter person.
Maybe from the young person's perspective, and how would you and or your peers wish to learn from people who have been around the block once or twice?
Well, I think it's kind of twofold in the sense where people are going to have to start to understand that the new generation isn't the same as, when you guys were 27. It's different. It's vastly different, right? And you're right.
I can't even remember back that far.
Yeah.
Seems like yesterday to me. I'm shocked.
Yeah, it's really both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, and it's like there's certain situations where, I am lucky where I get to kind of look something up on my phone. If I were to be speaking to Steve for the first time and I'm blanking right now on who he had worked for, and I should have done my preparation the night before, but I can all of a sudden go and look right away. If you guys had done that, you're going into that blank, and I'm blessed with that opportunity, so I don't have to work as hard in that situation. But what people my age have to learn is that you're not always going to be saved by technology. So if you utilize it to the point where you use the technology as a resource instead of using it as your backup plan, then you'll actually kind of succeed. And, if you do wake up at 6 a.m. to go grind, and as Irwin said, you got to put in your hours. Everyone did. When I was working in medical device, it was 90 hours a week because the guys before you did that. When I was a freshman on the lacrosse team, I was staying after to clean up all the balls and even do the laundry because the guys before you did that. But, if you're going to complain, then you're not going to have a place anywhere. So there's a certain level of my favorite line is just picking yourself up by your own bootstraps. Like, people at my age need to learn that no one's going to save you at 27. It's not college, and that is something that they need to really start teaching. Whether you start in middle school, high school, or obviously at college, you got to teach kids that the real world is not nice and it's not great. So you better learn to be tough, and you better learn to get knocked down and get back up.
I think we got to take all these young people and stick them on an island where there's no cellular data, no Wi-Fi, and take away their phones and their Netflix and their Amazon streaming, and let them actually talk to people and learn how to communicate.
Big deal.
It is a big deal.
I'm not so. I'm not so enrolled in it. It's because of technology. I'm not sure that's it. But the defining feature in what I see for young people, and forget that, for everybody, is there between the haves and the have-nots is attitude. And it's like everyone always interviews. Of course, everyone cares about attitude, but everyone interviews for like knowledge accumulation, for analytical reasoning, for understanding the context with which we operate in, and everything else. But 9 times out of 10, the people that are sitting in the finish line making that $1 million paycheck are the people that don't put themselves over everybody else, dig in, and really contribute, because that's why you get paid big bucks, because you're making things happen, and I don't think that's being taught in a lot of places. It's certainly not emphasized in the culture today. But I think that's the number one differentiator for talent.
Yeah, and on our next podcast, or maybe the next time we discuss this, because this was certainly fascinating, and I'm sure we can go for at least another hour, and Monty will probably be not happy about that one. So, yeah, on that note, I wanted to say that there's probably a little bit of abundance, or maybe even overabundance, that is part and parcel of the same issue, meaning like, there's been studies done about the children of alcoholics, some of which become alcoholics themselves, and others which utterly and completely reject that lifestyle choice, addiction, call it whatever it is. I'm not a doctor, nor do I purport to know much about this, other than the fact that different generations respond to the circumstances of their birth very differently. And is that genetic? Is that a decision? Where did that come from? How does one go about, putting themselves in everything we talked about, having the right attitude, having the right education, putting yourself in a learning mindset, assuming that the responsibility begins and ends with you, and making sure that if the world knocks you down, you pick yourself up by the bootstraps. It's not the end of the world. Frankly, it's a learning experience. So those, I think, are interesting topics for further conversation. And I want to thank Irwin. I want to thank Steve for joining me today for our Ventures and Visionaries podcast. It was a great conversation around the growth and even the leadership mindset. So appreciate you both, and look forward to speaking to you again soon.